The Ravens and Steelers rivalry is still a rivalry, and the spicy talk has officially begun.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. And of course, now part of your year, as it's now 2026. Happy New Year. We are here for you 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content. And we have so much to talk about today as Steelers wide receiver challenged the Ravens defense. Also, we'll dive into Lamar Jackson getting support from his teammates after some great news. And then crossover Thursday with Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. Thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens and this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Calvin Austin, Steelers wide receiver, who missed last week's game against Cleveland, he was able to practice on Wednesday. But Chris Adamski, I apologize for not knowing the last name, but Chris Adamski of the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, he's been in the building, and I think we've actually talked about a couple of things Steelers players have said, courtesy of Chris before on the show. Chris passed along a quote from Calvin Austin, and he said, quote, asked if he foresees the Ravens again playing so much man coverage in Sunday's rematch with the Steelers. Calvin Austin says, quote, I pray they do. If they stick with that, then hey, let's go. So that's some spicy words right there. Those are some spicy words right there. Matt Williamson, who is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as he covers the Steelers and does some work, covering the team there over in Pittsburgh. He read out some stats specifically about man coverage in the Ravens, saying the Ravens have utilized man coverage on 33.6% dropbacks this season, the 7th highest in the NFL. However, they have allowed the 5th most yards per play when utilizing man, 6.4. Aaron Rodgers has struggled against man coverage, according to the 5th lowest completion rate, 50.8, and 12th fewest yards per attempt, 6.0. But recently, Mike Tomlin talked a lot about the lack of man coverage that the Ravens have utilized over the last handful of weeks. Tomlin said, quote, from a defensive perspective, it looks like they're minimizing some of their man-to-man since the last time we played them. We had some big plays in one-on-one circumstances. It looks like they've pivoted a little bit and worked to minimize some of that schematically. He said, quote, there are more zone defenses than there were last time, less isolation, one-on-one moments to produce one-on-one big plays and flip the field or produce scoring drives. It looks like they're doing some quintessential Baltimore things when things get thick. So I'm very curious to see how Baltimore matches up with Pittsburgh on Sunday night. There's going to be no DK Metcalf for Baltimore, or for Pittsburgh, in this game, or I guess no DK for Baltimore to worry about in this game. So I'm curious, but Calvin Austin, now with these words here, all eyes are going to be on him, assuming he does play. And again, the Ravens and Steelers, you got some spicy talk going on here, and I think people will revisit that quote depending on what happens after the game. Lamar Jackson, though, the Ravens got good news on him as he practiced in full on Wednesday. John Harbaugh is talking about maybe potential padding that Lamar's looking into for the game, assuming he does play. But hey, a full practice, about as good of a sign as you can have. And a couple of Lamar's teammates went and defended him, especially guys like Kyle Hamilton and Mark Andrews. And I thought it was really cool what Mark and Kyle both had to say. Kyle said, quote, I don't think it's ever a matter of does he want to. I think it's just a matter of is he physically able to do so. I've been around this dude for the past 4 years. I know what he's about. I know that he practices what he preaches. If he's able to go out there and play and practice, then he will do so. He's a warrior, and I respect him. Mark Andrews said you got to give a lot of credit to him and what he's been through all throughout his career, the type of scrutiny he's faced, and to be able to be where he's at. He's a fighter, and he's going to continue to fight for this organization. Everybody in this organization has trust in Lamar. I'm excited to take the field with him this week. We're going to fight our butts off. Well, I don't know if Mark maybe leaked the fact that Lamar is playing in that quote, saying that he's excited to take the field with him. But, that was really cool. And, even like Zay Flowers was asked about what, Lamar returning to practice was like, and he said it means everything. Seeing him back out there was very exciting for everyone. So again, feels like the energy is shifted over, the course of Wednesday and into Thursday here. So we know the impact Lamar has, and, just seeing Lamar back on the field pumps these guys up, which I think is really, really cool. But all right, let's get into our crossover Thursday now with Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, talking key storylines, key matchups, and a lot more.
Kevin, we meet again, my friend. And here we are. It's all on the line. This isn't, before a lot was on the line. Both teams were 6-6 when they met in Baltimore, and it was the Steelers were trending one way, the Ravens were trending the other, and then all of a sudden that game happened and it flipped. But then you go into last week, the Steelers just needed one thing to go their way. Ravens lose, Steelers win. Either one happens. This game doesn't matter. The AFC North clinched. And what happens? The Ravens walk into Lambeau and Derrick Henry bulldozes the Packers. The Steelers go into Cleveland. Their defense plays well, but their offense lays an egg. They lose, and here we are, Week 18 for all the marbles. Couldn't ask for anything better unless you're us who have to work until like 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday night.
Yeah, this is actually Baltimore's third straight primetime game, third straight flexed game. So, I've definitely, those late nights have been plenty for this team over the last handful of weeks, but Baltimore, as you mentioned, they took care of their business and got some help from Shedeur Sanders, Myles Garrett, and that Browns team to set up what I'm sure the NFL wanted all along, which is Ravens and Steelers for the division. And this, Chris, is usually, it is the time in the season, especially in a game like this with the magnitude and one win you're in, one loss you go home, where I always say in September, those September losses don't matter. But in December and January, they absolutely do. And you start to look back at some of those games that maybe you dropped by a touchdown or one play doesn't go your way, or you have a key turnover or a miss late, or you allow a score. And you're thinking, man, how different would this game be? What would the stakes be? Would there be any stakes if maybe the Steelers had picked up another game that they should have won, or the Ravens would have picked up another game they should have won? So it all comes down to this. And as Tara Linderbaum said during his availability on Wednesday, the playoffs are already here. It's win or go home. So this is already Week 18. Both the Ravens and Steelers, they're playing playoff football right now.
Absolutely. It's win or go home. The winner gets the 4th seed in the AFC North crown. The loser sits home and watches the rest of the playoffs there. But let's look at one of the top storylines this week. And it's both the standings of these coaches. And both these coaches have been very parallel. Both took over, strong rosters when they got in. The John Harbaugh took over in 2008. Mike Tomlin took over in 2007. The Steelers were able to win a Super Bowl in 2008. John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl in 2012, right?
Yeah, 2012, 13. Yep.
Yeah. I always mix up 12 and 13. But they both win a Super Bowl in their early years, and since then haven't really popped off. Now the Ravens, of course, they've had Lamar Jackson. He's been a multi-MVP. Maybe should have won a few more MVPs, but they've had their chances. The Steelers have, of course, been in the playoff rut that they've been. They still have never had a losing season, and if they win Sunday, it'll be their 3rd straight season with at least 10 wins. And I think the 4th or 5th time they've done that this decade. But there's a narrative out there right now that both these coaches could be coaching for their jobs, Kevin. And there's been noise about firing Mike Tomlin since he took over the job in Pittsburgh. It's always been someone that said, oh, he didn't deserve it. And then when he won a Super Bowl, it was like, well, he did it with coward players. And since then, it's been, every reason to try to discredit any success that he has. And here you are, of course, earlier this year when the Steelers got, beat up by the Bills, there were fire Mike Tomlin chants. And the first time that I've ever seen it in my time covering the team. And that kind of set a tone. Then, of course, they responded to that with a 3-game win streak, and they got things going that kind of got them into the position that they're in now. But that's a storyline. Now, we'll talk about the likelihood of either happening, but it sounds like there's also some rumblings about, could John Harbaugh's job be on the line? And it makes you wonder, is this not just a loser go home, but a loser's coach lose your job type of situation?
Yeah, I think that these two teams are a lot more connected in this regard than maybe some people think, because I think a lot of the same mindset that Steelers fans have, Ravens fans have, and same thing, the mindset Ravens fans has, I think Steelers fans have that too. And I think the big story is that, look, these teams, the regular season success has been there for them for the majority. And of course, you mentioned the Steelers and the non-losing record, like that has been on full display in Pittsburgh since Mike Tomlin took over, and it's been very rare that John Harbaugh has had a losing season as well. But I think what both fan bases are feeling right now, especially after years where, for the Ravens, they were picked in the Super Bowl by a lot of people to be the Super
Yeah.
Bowl champion or at least be the AFC representative. And they started 1-5. They've had ups and downs. Obviously there's context where Lamar's been banged up all year. The O-line's been terrible, whatever. But essentially, it's just like, how many times do you go back to the well of either not making the postseason, barely missing out, or losing in the wild card or divisional round? Because that's not the goal. The goal is not to make the playoffs and, hey, look at us, one of the top, 14 teams to make it. And then all of a sudden you're done and that's it. The goal is to hang banners, to get championships. And, while both these teams are Super Bowl winning coaches, John Harbaugh has 3 playoff wins over the last decade. And I mean, I guess that's better than, what the Steelers can say, especially recently. But
actually, who also has 3 playoff wins over the last decade? Because you have to include 2015.
Yeah.
They have the same amount of playoff wins.
But, and then, even at least, recently, they're able to pick up a win against the Steelers last postseason. Yep. And then they're able to, they get one win and then it's, all right, well, then you lose. And they haven't been able to get over that Kansas City hump, and Kansas City obviously not a factor this year. Buffalo doesn't look as strong as they have, but, neither does Baltimore. So it's going to be interesting because I know Adam Schefter, one of the Pat McAfee show, and kind of was outlining some possibilities and things that he might think could happen with not just John Harbaugh, but Mike Tomlin as well. And one of the things that he talked about is that someone is going to lose the game. And when that happens, there are going to be conversations throughout the organization. And he said that he believes that both these coaches, for all that they've done and for all they've meant to the organizations and to the league, that they will have a big say, that it won't just be like the owners going to the coach and say, hey, you're done here. It might be more of a mutual, hey, how are you feeling? And maybe it would be Tomlin or Harbaugh that goes in there and says, it's been he said, quote, maybe they go in there and say, it's been a great run. Might be time to go try something else, whether that's TV or another job somewhere else, and that those things are possible in a wide range of possibilities. But, for either of these teams, whoever loses that game, and honestly, whoever wins it, and if they don't go far in the playoffs, there are going to be those conversations because, in Pittsburgh, obviously, they're trying to figure out a long-term answer at quarterback, but they have talent on that roster. For Baltimore, they have Lamar Jackson, and every year you don't win a Super Bowl is a year that you're wasting of his prime. And at that point, you just have to wonder, are Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, who have had great careers, are they the coach to get their teams over that hump, or if they just plateaued out? And sometimes it doesn't mean that a guy is a bad coach and that he wouldn't have success elsewhere, but sometimes a team just needs a different voice or a different person in that role. And that might be what we're looking at here.
And so I think there's a lot of Steelers fans. Not a lot. I think there's a few loud Steelers fans. There's a lot of Steelers fans that appreciate Mike Tomlin and what he's been able to do. But I think that this is where there might be a difference in things. Now, I'll tell you this straight up. I have people on the team inside. People have told this: the Rooneys are not getting rid of Mike Tomlin. They're not going to fire him. He's never going to be kicked out of the organization. People that want that to happen, it's just not going to happen. It would have to be, like you said, a mutual agreement where Mike Tomlin says, hey, you know what? I'm okay stepping down. And because I feel like I've done enough here and I'm ready to move on with my life and do something else for a little bit or for however long, whatever. But Mike Tomlin is not getting fired, especially because, and I think the other thing here about the Steelers, and I don't know the contract history of John Harbaugh, but the Steelers signed Mike Tomlin to a 3-year contract extension in June of 24. So last year. And that was not with the thought that, oh, we're going to get rid of him in a couple of years if this doesn't turn around with old man Russell Wilson or old man Aaron Rodgers. They did that to give Mike Tomlin time to say, hey, we believe in you. We think you can keep this thing afloat. We think we can keep building. And we think that by the time we get to the next time we want to negotiate, then we can see, all right, have you rebuilt the trenches on both sides of the ball? Has there been a new nucleus? If not, you probably had a few losing seasons, and then we will say goodbye. But as of right now, Mike Tomlin has locked in another winning season, another season where he has that streak, and if he wins this game, it's his, I think, third straight year in the playoffs. So I think that the Steelers can kind of recognize, like, hey, this isn't the prime Lamar Jackson years. This isn't like he's wasting anyone's time. It's like, hey, a lot of people, we did our AFC North preview show. I think I was the only person that said that they would even finish in second in the division. A lot of people thought they were going to finish in last or third. And I was like, no, I think that they can at least get to number 2. And they've locked themselves in at least at number 2, or maybe even will win the division straight out based off of how this game goes. And I think that's the difference for what might be the tone with Mike Thomas. The Steelers recognize, hey, people said the Steelers went all out. They stretched out no contract. They moved nobody's money at the end of the season. They didn't move any money down the line so that this contract, this roster could be loaded. Most of their free agents were guys that they signed late in free agency that couldn't impact their comp picks. This was a year where they said, hey, we're going to give it a shot with these guys that we're trying to do. But this was not a year where they were saying, hey, we're putting all our chips to the middle, because if it were, they would have kept Minkah Fitzpatrick when they added Jalen Ramsey. They would have kept George Pickens instead of trading away for a pick. And then they would have also signed a few more players. And they said, let's get a little more aggressive here and there. They didn't do those things. But what they have done is they said, hey, we're trying to rebuild a nucleus. We're trying to figure out a new way for this team to win moving forward. Let's talk about a few other things on this side of the break, including update on Lamar Jackson. Will he play in this game? We'll talk about updates there on the injury reports, other guys like TJ Watt, and other factors here on the Crossover Thursday episode here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Steelers, Locked On Ravens. Chris Carter, Kevin Oestreicher. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens. Kevin, let's talk about the quarterback situation for the Ravens. Now, Tyler Huntley came in, and just like he does in that Geico, I think it's Geico commercial, where he comes in and fills in for the guy talking to his kid, he filled in great for the Ravens. He came in, did his job, didn't try to do too much, and it was exactly what the doctor ordered. Went on the road, beat a Packers team that sure is struggling. That was their third straight loss, but still, it's tough to win in Lambeau. And it was an impressive win. He finished that game 16 of 20 for 107 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown. Of course, the game was carried by Derrick Henry going off for 216 and 4 touchdowns, but still, Huntley also ran for 60 yards, was pretty solid there. But it looks like Lamar Jackson's getting healthy. I think he's a full participant in practice. What's the word there in Baltimore? Is Lamar back, or do you think that they're just going to you're going to protect him for one more week?
I don't think you need to protect him for one more week if he's able to go. And even if he's 70%, I mean, throw him out there, in my opinion. That's been the top of the conversation is, yes, Tyler Huntley's filled in admirably for Lamar Jackson, like you mentioned. He's been great, and he's come back to Baltimore again and has improved on a lot of things that he had to work on as a young quarterback. And I think we're seeing that a lot across the league of, like, guys just needing time, like Malik Willis in Green Bay, who Baltimore saw last week, needed some time to kind of get things right. And now he's playing well for Green Bay, filling in for Jordan Love. But that for Tyler Huntley, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, like, this guy should be your starter over Lamar Jackson, who I think you can run a similar game plan with Derrick Henry. And again, if Lamar's not 100%, I know no one technically is at this point in the season anyway, but like if Lamar is like genuinely, all right, the back is still bothering him, the hamstring stuff and all that, I think you should lean on Derrick Henry again. Give that man 25 to 30 carries and see if he can go to work. Now, I know the first time these two teams played, even without Derrick Harmon, Pittsburgh held Derrick Henry to under 100 yards on 25 carries, 25 for 94. So they did a good job. And like you mentioned, Green Bay is very beat up on the D-line. New England was missing their best defender and second best player in Milton Williams. This Steelers D-line is going to give the Ravens a lot more problems than the past 2 weeks, but the offensive line for Baltimore has played 2 of their best games of the year in back-to-back weeks. So if they can protect Lamar Jackson, I wouldn't expect a ton in terms of him moving around. There have been some discussion points about Lamar weighing his options for potential protection on his back, maybe wearing some padding underneath or whatnot, and what that would maybe feel like for him. But Lamar was a full participant, which obviously is a very good sign heading into Sunday night's game. And I think that, that he will, my prediction is he will be back. He will be playing. John Harbaugh said if Lamar's good enough to go, he will go. And there's no conversation essentially about Tyler Huntley being that guy if Lamar can play. Lamar's toughed it out for a lot of the season. I think the rest that he had against Green Bay hopefully helped some of the lower leg stuff he's been dealing with. So Lamar is still the Ravens guy. And despite it being a rough year for him and, probably a pretty frustrating year, winning against the Steelers in Acrisure and heading to the postseason would be, I think, a nice little cherry on top to the end of a pretty rough season.
It certainly would be. If you're Lamar Jackson, you face a team that's been your rival and that honestly has been a thorn in his side. Lamar Jackson has been a multi-MVP quarterback, but he is, I believe, 1-4 as a starter against the Steelers, and 1-4 in the regular season, 3-5 overall, I believe. But you go to the two games that they won last year, that kind of broke a stretch. But the Steelers, in large part, have been successful at least containing Lamar Jackson. But here's the thing that I say to you, Kevin, and this will kind of feed into what I think is one of the main stories of the game. The Ravens, something that Mike Tomlin has always said, even back in the 2008, like Ray Lewis versus Hines Ward days, he was like, the Ravens make us better and we make the Ravens better. And that rivalry is what makes this rivalry great, is that each team's trying to outdo each other. And last year, the Ravens bulldozed the Steelers in both those last two games that they won, and Derrick Henry went off. And what did the Steelers do? They said, we're going to up our run defense. They spent their first round pick on Derrick Harmon, and he has been a stout pickup. They've also added guys like Y.A. Black. They brought in Malik Harrison, a Ravens linebacker, to be their primary run stuffer, sort of buck 3-4 linebacker. They've put more effort into shoring up things. They've let guys like Keanu Benton mature up front. And now they're a run defense that actually ranks just outside the top 10 on the year, and something that Steelers fans have become ever more aware, because a lot of us in the media keep pointing this out here in Pittsburgh, is that when Derrick Harmon is on the field, that run defense is different. They go from averaging 86 yards per game when he's been active for the Steelers to giving up 160 yards per game on the ground when he's not. And then I went even further and I did some advanced statistics, and I just looked at snaps when he's on the field, even when he's active in a game, but just resting on the sidelines. And I looked at the numbers, and according to this, when he's not on the field, the Steelers give up 4.5-ish rushing yards per play. When he is on the field, they give up 3.5-ish rushing yards per play. Now it may sound like, oh, it's just a yard, but those rates, Kevin, that's when he's off the field, that's a rate that would put you as the 25th best rushing defense in the NFL. When he's on the field, that's the best that would be the best rushing defense in the NFL. And in the last 3 weeks since he's returned, they've allowed the fewest rushing yards in the NFL. And so I look at Derrick Harmon and I say, to him, to this defense this is their test. And I think a lot of them know it. That's where I think a lot of this game is going to come down to, is not just stopping Derrick Henry, but when Lamar's ready to run, be ready for him to pull it and keep it himself and try to make something happen. And if Snoop Huntley's the guy doing it, same thing there. If they're pulling it, you still got to hit him. You still got to account for him. This is where the Steelers have to show that their improvements in the run defense have been for real.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Ravens lucked out not facing Harmon the first time. And like I mentioned, even still, they were able to kind of contain Derrick Henry and keep him in check. This should just be a hand the ball to Derrick Henry game and then kind of work with Lamar, where they've called the games differently that Huntley is played than they have with Lamar. And part of that is Huntley's not going to push the ball down the field. They wanted to simplify for Huntley. He makes things pretty simple and, not put too much on his plate. And there was really he did a good job of essentially being a game manager. I know that term gets a lot of flack, but I'm using it in a genuinely good way, where he was able to go out there and not put the ball in harm's way outside of really one throw. That was it. And so with Lamar, you're able to push the ball down the field a little bit more, able to kind of stretch the defense a little bit more. But if Derrick Henry, against the Packers, when Derrick Henry was rolling the way that he was, Green Bay had to sell out to stop it on essentially every single play, because they just couldn't match Baltimore's physicality. And with that, when the Ravens were faced with some key third downs and they decided to throw the ball, Green Bay had to continue to keep guys in the box because they couldn't afford to allow the Ravens to run the ball and pick up firsts that way, which Baltimore actually did a couple times on third down and medium, which was really good to see. But so Pittsburgh, I think it's just a much more physical front. And again, like Pittsburgh's not playing their second and third string guys like Green Bay was in that game. I mean, there's no Micah Parsons, no Devontae Wyatt. Rashawn Gary's regressed to the point over there where he was getting out leveraged by Tez Walker, who is like half his size. So it's tough. And I mean, we saw some of that in Pittsburgh and Baltimore's matchup the first time where like, you know, Brandon Echols out leverages Daniel Falele on a sack, and Falele is like 4 times Brandon Echols' size. So it's just about, I think physicality is going to play a huge part in this game. Obviously, Derrick Henry is extremely physical, but where he is most dangerous is when he gets that head of steam and can get to the second and third levels of a defense, where if you can collapse on him early and win against that Ravens offensive line and stuff him in the backfield, sure, he can escape some of those tackles and fall forward. You know, I think every time he falls forward, he gets 2 or 3 yards because he's just that big of a guy. But it's going to come down to if Baltimore's offensive line can continue their momentum against a much better defensive front than they've faced.
I agree. Momentum is going to be huge, and especially momentum of Derrick Henry, like you said. I talked to Alex Highsmith, Steelers outside linebacker, Wednesday in the locker room, and we asked him about Derrick Henry. He's like, you can't let that man's feet get going. We have to keep him when his feet get going and he picks up momentum and he starts using that stiff arm. That's when he's dangerous. We got to get to him in the backfield at the line of scrimmage, keep him from starting it up. And then if you keep doing that, he might get 3-4 here because he's still a big, strong dude. But you wear him down, you waste the carries that he has, and you to keep it so that he doesn't explode. One thing that I noticed when I went back and looked, the 7 times the Steelers have faced Derrick Henry, whether it was with the Ravens or with the Titans, the 5 times the Steelers are 5-0 when he doesn't get 100 yards. They're 0-2 when he does get 100 yards, and both of those times happened last year when the Ravens beat the Steelers. We'll talk about a few more things, including both defenses here and who matches up where. Will TJ Watt play? We'll talk about all that here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Kevin Oestreicher, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports, bowl games, big basketball matchups, and playoff pushes. It happens happening all at once while we're making choices every day. One of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats, fantasy scores, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. The early payout feature is a great bonus. When your lineup starts strong, you may get the option to cash out early. Download PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. He's Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens. We continue our episode here. Kevin, I pointed this out earlier in the week, and it's something weird that I noticed earlier when these two teams played. There's a lot of similarities between these teams, and not just like in like the fact that they have longtime coaches and they're respectable organizations, but even in the stats that they allow. When I looked at offensive EPA per play, the Steelers get their EPA per play on offense is 0.02. The Ravens is 0.02. Defensive EPA per play, Steelers is 0.01. Ravens is 0.01. Yards per play allowed on defense, Steelers 5.4 yards per play allowed. Ravens 5.5. Passing yards per game allowed, 245.3 for the Steelers, 245.3 for the Ravens, and even rushing yards per carry allowed. Steelers allow 4.2 yards per carry. Ravens allow 4.2 yards per carry. There's so many similarities to how these teams play right now. It's kind of crazy. And despite the different things that they're doing organizationally wise, the Steelers have old Aaron Rodgers. They're kind of waiting for their chance to take their next shot at a franchise quarterback. The Ravens have their guy in Lamar Jackson. I want to talk about this defense, though. Where is this Ravens defense now as far as how it's developed this year, what you've seen? They rank 18th in scoring. They're like 29th against the pass. But where have you seen them either improve or fall off this year as far as what's to be expected here?
Yeah, well, I think I'll start by saying it is a much better unit than it was early in the season, and the bar was
Mm.
on the floor for that, so it wasn't very hard to be better. But they've actually quietly turned themselves into a really good conversion defense, where, again, early in the season, all those numbers were 30, 31, 32, like 30, whatever it may be. Right now, Baltimore is the fifth best red zone defense in the NFL, 50.8% conversion percentage. They're also the ninth best third down defense in the NFL at 36.4. And they've actually turned their run defense around like complete 180. They are the 11th best rush defense in the league now, which, again, from where they were in the first month and a half of the season, is a miraculous turnaround. And the first time these two teams played, the Steelers only averaged 2 yards a carry, 17 carries for 34 yards. And I think, again, the Steelers are a better running team than that. I think Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren are better than that. But it just kind of goes to show that they've really kind of hit their stride over this last month or two with that run defense. The problem for them is their pass rush is still far too inconsistent. And luckily for the Steelers, the Ravens do not have Myles Garrett on their roster. So that's going to be big for Pittsburgh. But Baltimore just needs to get consistent pressure. That's one of my huge keys to the game, because we saw like the pressure with Aaron Rodgers that he was facing without DK Metcalf, which is he's not going to be available for this game as well. It forced him to make some tough decisions and get the ball out and take some sacks, not by Myles Garrett, but from other players of the Browns team. So that pass rush with guys like Mike Green and Kyle Van Noy, Tavius Robinson, Draymond Jones, who they acquired at the deadline, and they have Travis Jones on the interior. They're missing Nnamdi Madubuike a lot, who's been out since week 2. But that pass rush needs to step up against the Steelers' offensive line, and their pass defense also has been suspect. They play a lot of off coverage and give cushion, and that's kind of the identity of their defense, where they are not going to give you the deep stuff, at least not going to try to. They've actually done a not so great job of allowing that over the last handful of weeks. But their third down defense, which I mentioned was turning around, they gave up like 3rd and 18 to the Packers and 3rd and 9 to the Packers, a lot of 3rd and long. So they have to be better in those situations. Kyle Hamilton, though, is still the unicorn of that defense, a Swiss Army knife. He is everywhere. He's been incredible again this season. They also sometimes struggle with missing tackles. So honestly, I don't know what to expect from this defense, but I do know the Steelers having DK Metcalf out, who accounted for 148 yards of Pittsburgh's offense in the first matchup, that does favor Baltimore.
Another thing I found in how close these teams were, the Ravens rank 11th in rushing yards per game allowed. The Steelers rank 12th. The Ravens rank 5th in the NFL in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. The Steelers rank 6th. Like they're so close in a lot of these perspectives. The one thing that I think the Steelers have on the Ravens in spades is that they are one of the better sack producing teams in the NFL. Even when TJ Watt hasn't been playing, Alex Highsmith has been really bringing it. The Steelers rank 7th in sacks per game right now. The Ravens rank 30th in the NFL in that regard. I think that is going to be a big factor in this game. The Ravens have to find a way to make Aaron Rodgers uncomfortable, he already gets the ball out quickly, Kevin, but what the Browns were able to do, and again, the Steelers did what they always do against Myles Garrett. People were like, "Oh, that's why they lost the game, was they focused too much on him." That's ridiculous. They also didn't allow any sacks when they beat up on them 23-9 earlier this season. So, in fact, Myles Garrett's played the Steelers twice and not gotten any sacks this year. But where I think that the things were, Aaron Rodgers' clock is knowingly sped up a little bit. And it's like, okay, we have to handle things a little bit more carefully here because we can't let that guy wreck the game. And it's about, hey, can I make better decisions? We saw Aaron Rodgers start to look really comfortable when he was playing the Ravens. Even when Mike Green, I couldn't believe it when I saw this on TV, when Mike Green had a clean shot at him and he just ducked under it. And I was like, Aaron Rodgers is not supposed to be doing that anymore, man. And in that game, he had 284 passing yards. Now, again, to your point, no DK Metcalf. And out of the 284, 148 went to Metcalf in that game. And that's going to be a big factor. Can the Steelers find other ways to move the ball? It looks like Calvin Austin will be back for this game. So they'll at least have the guy who's typically been their number 2 this year back on the receiving pattern. But I think the guy that the Ravens really should watch out for this week is Pat Freiermuth. Darnell Washington's also been put on injured reserve, so he's not going to be available most likely if the Steelers somehow make the Super Bowl. That would be the only chance of him even coming back to play. But Pat Freiermuth has been a beber blocker this year. This is the best version of a blocking Pat Freiermuth I've seen in his career. And he's been getting open quite a bit. And Steelers listeners and viewers on this show right now are know that I've been banging the table for months. get this guy the football because he gets open. And in this Browns game, whenever they got him the ball, it was like a 20-yard completion, and it was a big gain, and they moved the chains and got them in scoring position. When they didn't give him the ball, it was Marquez Valdes-Scantling not being able to win. And so, to me, Kevin, this is going to be interesting to see how do the Ravens try to play the Steelers. Do they try to overload the box, not let them run? They shut down the run game the last time these two teams played. Or do they say, hey, we're going to try to make sure that Pat Freiermuth and these guys don't get off, and that it is just a really hard day for Aaron Rodgers and a passing attack that's missing his top receiver.
Chris is awesome. Be sure to check him out over at Locked On Steelers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be rounding out the show for the weekday episodes with more Ravens coverage. So stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.